this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty, which have now passed to my beloved daughter.
On a crisp autumn morning, the world held its breath as King Charles stepped to the podium, his face resolute yet shadowed by fear. There was something in his eyes that even decades of royal composure couldn't mask. The cameras rolled, and flashes lit the grand hall of Buckingham Palace, but the silence was heavier than the marble walls surrounding them. To his left, Queen Camilla stood with a quiet determination, her hand just brushing his sleeve, while Prince William stood to his right, jaw tight, gaze fixed ahead. The room felt smaller, more intimate, despite the throngs of reporters packed shoulder to shoulder, each of them waiting for history to unfold before their eyes. As Charles began to speak, his voice, though steady, carried an unmistakable weight. He acknowledged his ongoing battle with cancer, which the nation already knew about. But then came the words that froze the room and, for a moment, the entire world. A new illness. He did not name it, only describing it as a shadow that had recently been discovered. A burden heavier than even his previous trials. His words were carefully chosen, yet they carried a rawness that no royal script could disguise. The pause after his confession felt endless, as though the air itself thickened with grief and disbelief. And then, just as the crowd began to absorb this revelation, he delivered another blow, one no one was prepared for. He announced his decision to pass sovereignty to his daughter-in-law, Catherine, Princess of Wales. Gasps cut through the stunned silence, and whispers ricocheted off the gilded walls. Social media, watching in real time, erupted like a storm. 1,000 headlines were written before he even finished his sentence. Catherine, standing just out of sight in the wings, was visibly shaken. Those close enough to catch a glimpse saw her eyes glisten with tears she tried so hard to contain, her hands tightly clasped together as though willing herself not to shatter. The cameras caught none of it, but those who know her understood. This was not just a historic moment for the monarchy. It was a moment of unbearable humanity. The weight of a crown she never expected to carry had been placed on her shoulders with a single sentence. A mother, a wife, and a survivor, now faced with a future she neither sought nor could refuse. And as Charles's voice echoed through the hall, the enormity of what had just happened began to sink in, not just for Catherine, but for everyone watching around the world. But what the cameras didn't see that morning was even more dramatic. The private battles that led to this historic declaration. While the nation speculated wildly, the palace chose silence, leaving the world to fill the void with whispers and fear. The announcement of a new illness, described only as a shadow, was as chilling as it was vague. Buckingham Palace issued no further clarifications that day, and in the absence of facts, imaginations ignited. It was a masterstroke of royal restraint, or perhaps a desperate attempt to hold back a tide they could not yet control. Reporters clawed for answers. Commentators replayed every word, every glance, every pause in King Charles's delivery, desperate to decode what lay behind the carefully crafted statement. But no name was given to the disease, and that deliberate omission became the biggest story of all. Almost immediately, theories began to swirl. The public, already weary from months of watching their monarch wage a quiet battle against cancer, now faced something even more unsettling: the unknown. Some pointed to the obvious signs of breathlessness he had displayed during engagements earlier that year. At a state banquet in 2024, his voice had grown faint and strained before the evening was through, and aides were seen subtly steadying him as he left the hall. Observers began stitching together these fragments and landed on a chilling possibility: COPD, a progressive lung condition notorious for its cruel erosion of breath and strength. It seemed plausible. It made sense of his fatigue, of his increasingly deliberate movements. Others saw something different. They had noticed the faint tremor in his hand during a ceremonial handshake with a visiting dignitary months prior. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but to an attentive public, it was damning. Whispers of Parkinson's disease began echoing in every corner of social media. The thought of a monarch gradually losing control over his own body added an even darker undertone to his already fragile image. It became the subject of endless debate. Was it his lungs or his nervous system? Which specter haunted the king more? The clues were there, or so it seemed. His bloodshot eyes during a recent tour abroad, dismissed at the time as a burst vessel, now appeared in a more sinister light. His labored speech, once attributed to exhaustion, now sounded like the voice of someone fighting an unseen battle for every breath or every controlled motion. Buckingham Palace, true to its traditions, maintained its rigid composure. Their statements remained flat, mechanical, devoid of any revelation. But that very silence became deafening. With every non-answer, with every carefully worded refusal to elaborate, they only fed the hunger for more, fueled the fear that the truth was far worse than anyone dared say aloud. And while the world speculated about what his illness could be, behind the curtains, the real story was unfolding, a deeply personal and emotional journey that intertwined two lives. In a quiet room at Sandringham, long before the cameras flashed, Charles confided his darkest fears to Catherine. The weight of his secret had grown unbearable, yet there was only one person he trusted to carry it with him. In that hushed conversation, stripped of titles and ceremony, he revealed what no press statement could ever convey: the creeping fear of decline, the suffocating uncertainty of his diagnosis, and the relentless shadow that had begun to close around him. Catherine listened, her silence more powerful than any words, her presence steady as he spoke. It was not just her status as Princess of Wales that drew him to her that night, but something deeper, something forged in the fires of her own pain. Her cancer battle had stripped her of illusions too, teaching her how to walk through fear without letting it consume her. She understood the quiet dread of waiting rooms, the way nights stretch endlessly when your own body has become a battlefield. When she placed her hand gently over his, there was no pity in her eyes, only recognition. That night, they spoke long after the others had gone to bed. The hours dissolved into whispers as they unspooled their private vulnerabilities. Catherine admitted how many times she had faked strength, how often she had smiled through fatigue so crushing it left her trembling in private. Charles confessed how deeply the thought of becoming a burden tormented him, how he feared that the monarchy and his family deserved someone stronger. In those hours, the walls between them fell away, revealing not a king and his daughter-in-law, but two human beings clinging to each other in the darkness. It was in Catherine's quiet strength that Charles found the courage to face the world. The next morning, as he prepared to speak to the nation, her words lingered in his mind. "You can't control what's coming, but you can show them you're not afraid to stand in the storm." That resolve became his armor, and when he later stood at the podium, his voice unwavering, it was because he knew she was there, watching, carrying a piece of his burden herself. Their bond, forged in illness and honesty, became the foundation of his trust in her leadership. In Catherine, he saw not just resilience but a mirror of his own humanity, someone who knew the cost of survival and was willing to bear it with grace. Together, in that quiet room at Sandringham, they sealed a pact that would change the course of the monarchy forever. But while their bond deepened privately, the world was left wondering why not William, the heir apparent. When the king uttered Catherine's name, the question hung in the air like thunder. Why her, not the Prince of Wales? To the world, it seemed unthinkable to bypass the heir apparent in favor of his wife. But beneath the surface, the decision revealed itself as both calculated and profoundly human. William, already carrying the monumental weight of his father's legacy, stood as the steady future of the monarchy. His path was fixed, his responsibilities immense and long-term. Charles had no doubt of his son's ability to lead when the time inevitably came, but the immediate storm demanded something different, something only Catherine could embody. She was not a replacement for William, but a complement to him. In choosing her as a regent-like figure, Charles signaled that the present required more than lineage. It required resilience in the face of raw adversity. Catherine, having endured her own public and private battles, possessed a rare ability to straddle duty and humanity. The immediacy of Charles's health crisis called for someone who could both steady the institution and touch the people's hearts as a bridge between the monarchy and the nation. Her resilience had already captured the world's imagination. During her cancer battle, she showed grace not as a royal insulated from pain, but as a woman stripped of certainty, who stood anyway. That kind of authenticity transcended titles. The public saw themselves in her struggles and in her quiet victories. Her symbolic connection to the nation became her greatest strength. People didn't just admire Catherine, they trusted her. In that trust lay a power no crown could bestow. Yet even more crucial was William's unwavering support of his wife's appointment. Those close to the couple revealed that he not only consented but actively encouraged it. Far from being sidelined, William saw the choice as a way to shield Catherine, while also honoring his father's wishes. Together, They presented a united front, with two pillars holding up the same kingdom. It was a partnership, not a rivalry, and one that strengthened rather than fractured the monarchy. The king's choice was not simply emotional, nor was it merely strategic. It was both a decision born from his love for his family and his acute understanding of what the monarchy needed at this precarious moment. In Catherine, he found a figure who could honor tradition while embodying a modern, empathetic strength. Stability married with inspiration. Duty laced with humanity. And as her name echoed through the halls of Buckingham Palace, the world began to see that this was not about displacing William, but about crafting a new way forward. Yet this royal strategy had ripple effects far beyond the couple, echoing through the entire family. Behind palace walls, every member of the family faced the weight of the king's announcement in their own quiet way. The shockwaves that rippled through the public were nothing compared to the emotions brewing within the royal household. William stood as a figure of stoic pride, his presence calm and unwavering, yet those closest to him could see the struggle in his eyes. He balanced the dual burdens of love and duty with remarkable grace, proud of Catherine for being entrusted with such an honor, but fiercely protective of her as the enormity of it settled upon her shoulders. Each glance he cast her way carried both admiration and an unspoken promise that he would shield her from what he could. Camilla, meanwhile, became an unexpected anchor. Having endured her own decades of public scrutiny and private pain, she offered quiet guidance to Catherine when the cameras turned away. Her words were measured, her advice rooted in hard-won wisdom, and her support never more evident than in the subtle ways she steadied the family during moments of strain. In private, she reassured Catherine that the throne was not just about ceremony, but about resilience, and that she already possessed it. The children felt it too, though perhaps in ways only a family could understand. George, Charlotte, and Louis, innocent yet perceptive, shared tender moments with their grandfather in the days following the announcement. George seemed to watch everything with a quiet solemnity, a budding awareness of the future waiting for him. Charlotte, mature beyond her years, sensed the shift more acutely than her brothers. At a family dinner, she placed her small hand over Charles's and whispered something that brought a rare softness to his tired face. Even Louis, with his playful defiance of royal formality, managed to draw smiles from a family weighed down by uncertainty. The extended family, Princess Anne, the Duke of Edinburgh, and others, closed ranks in solidarity. There were no arguments, no fractures, only a shared understanding that their roles, no matter how great or small, were now in service of something larger than themselves. The sight of Anne quietly walking with Catherine through the gardens, offering reassurance without words, spoke volumes about the unity that now defined them. Together, they formed a fortress of strength in the storm, each one carrying a piece of the burden, each one playing their part in keeping the monarchy steady, even as it faltered under the weight of illness and transition. In those intimate moments away from the headlines and the speculation, they became not just a royal family, but simply a family. And yet, amid the personal turmoil, Catherine herself stood at a crossroads torn between love and duty. Off stage, Catherine's trembling hands spoke volumes. This was not just about a crown, but about survival and sacrifice. The cameras might have captured her regal poise, the world might have seen only her polished smile, but underneath, she carried a storm that few could fathom. In the wake of her own cancer battle, Catherine was still learning to navigate the long shadows left behind. Moments when fatigue would quietly tighten its grip, fears would resurface unbidden, and the invisible scars of her fight would ache in the silence of night. Yet it was precisely these scars that shaped her into the woman standing now at the center of the monarchy's most fragile hour. She had forged her strength, not in palaces, but in the quiet spaces where she learned to breathe again. On long walks through the gardens of Kensington, where the air seemed to carry away her anxieties. At the piano, where soft melodies became a kind of therapy, each note soothing what words could not. And in the small, chaotic moments with her children baking lopsided cupcakes, laughing at bedtime stories where she found the most profound sense of purpose. These grounding rituals became her armor, reminders that she was more than her illness, more than the weight of expectation pressing against her. In public, she became a symbol of resilience, a beacon of hope for countless others fighting their own invisible battles. She did not shy away from the truth of her journey. When she spoke at hospitals and charities, she admitted her struggles, her moments of doubt, her quiet breakdowns. This raw honesty stripped away the veneer of untouchable royalty and allowed the world to see her as one of them, wounded yet unbroken. afraid, yet still moving forward. People began to see her not just as a princess, but as a woman who understood suffering and wore it with dignity. Over time, this quiet strength transformed her. No longer merely the supportive figure beside William, she evolved into something more, a quiet authority in her own right, commanding respect not through power but through empathy. She began to carry herself differently, her presence no longer only graceful, but also commanding in its stillness, its certainty. Even within the palace walls, aides and family alike started to look to her not just for comfort but for guidance, her instincts proving as sharp as her heart was kind. And yet her story was not just about personal growth, it signaled a seismic shift in the monarchy's future. As Catherine's tears dried, a new vision for the monarchy began to take shape, one that dared to break centuries-old traditions. The announcement of her role as regent was not merely a response to the crisis, but the unveiling of a monarchy willing to evolve under pressure. For the first time in living memory, the institution openly embraced both its history and its humanity, finding a leader who could embody both. Catherine's elevation to such a pivotal position became a symbol of modernity meeting tradition, a quiet revolution cloaked in royal dignity. It was a choice that honored the past, yet refused to be shackled by it, proving that the crown could still surprise the world. Her personal connection to the public gave this vision its strength. People saw in her something real, someone who carried the scars of her struggles without hiding them, who stood before them not only as a princess but as a mother, a survivor, and above all, a human being. Her authenticity resonated more deeply than scripted speeches or ceremonial displays ever could. Each time she appeared, whether to comfort the sick, champion charities, or simply offer a smile when words fell short, she strengthened the fragile bond between the monarchy and its people. In Catherine, they saw a future that belonged to them as much as it belonged to the palace. Yet the decision was not without its critics. Some bristled at the idea of bypassing William, questioning whether it undermined his rightful place. Others whispered that tradition had been sacrificed too easily, that the monarchy risked appearing unsure of its own succession. But for every skeptic, there were 10 voices who lauded the choice, who understood that this was not about displacing William, but about preserving the institution through its most vulnerable moment. Supporters praised Catherine's quiet strength, her ability to unite rather than divide, and her courage to lead even when she had not sought the spotlight. Behind it all stood Charles, his trust in her both paternal and strategic. He saw her not just as his daughter-in-law but as a woman uniquely capable of guiding the monarchy through the uncertainty of his illness and beyond. This trust, forged in private moments of shared vulnerability and witnessed by the world in his historic announcement, revealed a king who understood the value of courage over convention. His decision to place her at the heart of the monarchy was as much a testament to her as it was to his own foresight. The announcement was no mere reaction to circumstance. It was framed, carefully and deliberately, as an evolution, a reimagining of royal leadership for a new era. Catherine's rise to prominence suggested that the monarchy could endure not by clinging stubbornly to the past, but by daring to redefine what it meant to lead. But questions still linger. Was Catherine ready for the storms ahead? With the weight of a nation on her shoulders, Catherine now faces the daunting task of leading through uncharted waters. Her appointment as regent, or perhaps, in time, as sovereign, remains conditional for now, yet its symbolism is undeniable. It marks her as more than just a princess, more than just a consort. It casts her as the figure entrusted with safeguarding the crown during its most vulnerable chapter. Even without the full authority of a monarch, she has become the face of continuity, the embodiment of a monarchy that refuses to falter in the face of illness and uncertainty. And with every step forward, she reshapes the role into something uniquely her own. Her plans already hint at the kind of leader she intends to be. Long before the king's announcement, Catherine's passion for mental health, environmental stewardship, and modern causes had set her apart from the rigid traditions of the past. Now those passions are expected to take center stage. Insiders suggest she is quietly building initiatives to tackle stigma around mental illness, to strengthen children's well-being, and to promote sustainable practices within the royal estates and beyond. These are not mere photo opportunities, but deliberate choices aimed at proving that the monarchy can still matter, that it can be more than ceremonial, that it can be a force for real change. But that vision comes at a cost. Catherine now walks a tightrope between her public responsibilities and the private life she has always guarded so fiercely. Motherhood, recovery, and regal duty now collide in ways few can imagine. The strain of balancing her role as a mother to 3 young children her own health after cancer, and the unrelenting demands of royal life has become her quiet crucible. She must somehow shield her children from the scrutiny that now follows her every move, while still carrying herself as the leader the nation expects her to be. And she does it all under the unblinking eye of a world that is waiting for some to see her succeed, others to see her stumble. The public's reaction has been both electric and divided. Social media erupted with hashtags like #Catherine Leads and #Future Queen, hailing her as the hope of the monarchy. But not everyone was convinced. Critics questioned whether she was ready for such a monumental task, whether the decision was fair to William, and whether the monarchy was asking too much of someone who had already endured so much. The debate itself, however, only underscored the extraordinary position she now occupies, one that unites, challenges, and captivates the nation all at once. And through it all, Catherine has shown a singular ability to inspire resilience. She stands at the center of a fragile monarchy, not because she sought power, but because she became its beating heart when it needed her most. Her ability to unify, to make people believe, not just in the crown, but in themselves, has become her greatest strength. And so the cameras may have stopped rolling that morning, but Catherine's journey and the monarchy's reckoning has only just begun. In the silence after the storm, one truth remains. This is not just about a crown, but about the heart that carries it. When Catherine's tears fell at the announcement, they spoke to something deeper than duty. A raw, unguarded love for Charles, a fierce loyalty to the family she married into, and a quiet, unspoken vow to a nation that now looked to her for strength. Those tears became the defining image of a woman who has learned that power comes not from a title, but from the willingness to bear the weight of others' expectations without breaking. Her quiet preparation and relentless determination over the years have stood as a testament to her character. Long before the cameras turned toward her as a future leader, she had already been learning, observing, and growing into the role she never asked for, yet somehow always seemed destined to fill. Through each hardship, her illness, her recovery, the relentless public gaze, she has forged herself into someone who can meet the moment, not because she is perfect, but because she is willing. In Catherine, strength and vulnerability live side by side, and that balance has become her greatest weapon. Charles's decision to entrust her with such responsibility reflects his profound faith in her unique blend of empathy and fortitude. He did not choose her to simply preserve the monarchy's traditions, but to infuse them with meaning that could reach beyond the palace walls. His choice was not just about strategy or succession. It was an acknowledgement of her ability to embody humanity so many felt the monarchy had lost. In Catherine, Charles saw not just a leader who could carry the crown forward, but a woman who could restore its connection to the people it serves. Through her, the monarchy's future seems destined to be redefined, shaped less by rigid hierarchy, and more by the personal bonds that hold a family and a nation together. This moment, born of crisis and fear, has become a turning point where love, trust, and personal courage outweigh protocol. It challenges everything we thought we knew about how power is passed, showing us that sometimes the strongest hands are not those born to rule, but those shaped by loss and resilience. And yet, one question lingers in the air, heavy and inescapable. Can Catherine truly change the face of royalty? Can she transform centuries of tradition without losing the dignity that sustains it? As the palace lights dim and the world watches, one thing is certain: Catherine's story is just beginning. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.